Welcome, everyone, and a special welcome to the Alaskans who are here tonight. We have some UAA alumni, some legislators, some folks who have come up from Washington, D.C. Thanks, one and all. My job is to give you a very brief lecture in demographics, geography, and economics to sort of set the stage for what is Alaska, because I suspect that there are some people here tonight who have never been there. Actually, would you raise your hand if you've never been to Alaska? That's what I thought. Okay, so let me start by saying this is to scale. I know that is a little hard to believe for most of you who have seen Alaska as a small island off the coast of California, but actually Alaska is 1/5 the size of the United States, 365 million acres, 1 million acres for every day of the year. It is indeed huge. It has 680,000 people, which is about the size of Memphis. So it's kind of hard to get your arms around this, but it's a very unusual state in that regard. We have something in the order of 5,000 glaciers, 3 million lakes. We have 2/3 of all national parklands in America. We have, of course, the tallest mountain. It is a land of superlatives. We don't have a whole lot of roads. As you can see, those are kind of the roads that we have. And the rest of the communities in Alaska you can only reach by air or by water, which also poses some rather interesting challenges for purposes of not only just plain transportation, but also the economy. And I might note that of the 365 million acres, 60% is owned by the federal government. So 60% of our lands actually you all own, which is a little bit different than most states also. And 28% of our lands are owned by the state, 12% by native corporations, and 1% by private ownership, other private ownership. So we're quite a bit different. So that's just a little bit about the geography. Let's see if I can get this to work. Now let me just tell you briefly about the economics of the state. They can be sort of summed up as in thirds. 1/3 oil and gas, 1/3 federal spending, and 1/3 everything else. So that 1/3 that is the petroleum sector, as you've already heard tonight, is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to us as Alaskans, and it's incredibly important to Americans in terms of providing a significant portion of oil and gas that is produced domestically. But since oil started flowing in the pipeline, which was 1977, oil was discovered at Prudhoe Bay in 1968, the pipeline was authorized, construction took place in the early 70s, and oil started flowing in the 1977. Since then, it has become the major driver, not only of our economy, but of state government and local government. We do not have an income tax, and we do not have a state sales tax. I know that's hard to believe right here in New York City. I know that seems impossible, but it is made possible by the fact that the oil that was discovered at Prudhoe Bay was on state land. Hugely important. It means that the state of Alaska took not only just a tax share of Prudhoe Bay wealth, but took an ownership, royalties. So it has provided an amazing stream of revenues to build our roads, open up our schools, provide all of the services that in most other states taxes provide. So it's very important to us in terms of jobs, very important to us in terms of revenue, very important to the world. So how about one of those other thirds, the federal spending? Federal spending is both civilian and military. In case you didn't know, the state of Alaska is in a very strategic location. And because of that strategic location, and I know somebody wants to ask this question, how far are we from Russia? 2.5 miles is the closest point between Alaska and Russia, 2.5 miles. That's the closest point. But beyond that, we're a very strategic location, and after World War II, when we, of course, built up a very large military set of bases, both in Fairbanks and Anchorage. Military spending, you can't really read those charts, but in 1960, that 33,000 employees in the federal military personnel and 23,000 in 2007. So it's actually less than it has been at its max, but it's still significant. So the federal government, both from the standpoint of civilian and military spending, provides an important part of our economy as well, in jobs, in contracts with the private sector, et cetera. All of this, of course, there's much longer story to all of this, but I'm trying to keep it brief. Okay, how about that other third? Remember I said 1/3 oil and gas, 1/3 federal spending, and 1/3 everything else. What's in that that other third? Tourism, fishing, mining, timber, international trade, etc. Tourism is big in Alaska. Haven't you always wanted to go to Alaska? It is so gorgeous. I mean, people come there to fish and to hunt and to hike and do all kinds of things. It's spectacular. And we have about 1.7, 1.8 million tourists a year. A lot of them come on cruise ships, but many of them come other ways. And of course, you're always welcome to Alaska. It's a very important part of our economy. About 40,000 jobs in Alaska are in the tourism industry. And another big player, Alaska's seafood industry. And you'll hear a little bit more about that from Senator Gary Stevens, who lives in Kodiak, one of the biggest fishing ports, not only in Alaska, but in America. Matter of fact, just to kind of put that into perspective, and I know you won't be able to read this chart, but Alaska is the 9th largest exporter of fish in the world as a nation. I mean, so we export more fish than Norway does. That's how big Alaska's export industry is in terms of seafood. Salmon, halibut, crab, ground fish. Again, we could talk a lot about what that does for coastal economies. I'm sure Gary will talk a little bit about that. Very important to our communities, very important historically to the state of Alaska. That's just some of the beauty that you'd see if you'd come visit us, and I hope you do. One other very important part of the economy, which Margie will talk to you about, is Alaska Native corporations. And I just put up a map to give you some sense. The 12 regional corporations are actually by region, and they're a very important part of our economy, both from the standpoint of job creation, attracting industry, but also having Alaskans actually be more in control of their destiny, which for many years we didn't feel we were, because we are sort of one of those colonies that many people think of us. I just want to say at the back of the room, actually by the front door, I will put it up there, is a very simple kind of 4-pager about the Alaska economy. We did this at the University of Alaska because this is the 50th anniversary of statehood. Alaska became a state in 1959, and we thought, yes, indeed, it's very special. Anyway, so back at the front door, you will see a map. The map, just so that you can tell your friends that Alaska isn't quite as small as they thought it was. And this little 4-pager that you can take with you that just talks a little bit more about the economics and the demographics of the state. It will make great plain reading and tell you things that I didn't have time to tell you about. So I'm going to pass this to Senator Gary Stevens from Kodiak. And again, I want to say thank you all so much for coming.